The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I was propped up in my bed, a myriad of tubes and monitors attached to me, when Ethan walked in. His gait was confident, almost too confident for someone who was supposed to be recovering from major surgery. My surgery. The surgery where I had given him a part of me, quite literally, to save his life. "Laura, we need to talk," Ethan began, avoiding my gaze. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of unease. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come, but nothing could have prepared me for his next words. "I think we should get a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had been yanked from under me. "What?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan finally met my gaze, his eyes cold and detached. "Look, Laura, you can't take care of the house or me anymore. This situation has made it clear. You're not the partner I need." I was stunned into silence. The man who stood before me, the man I had loved and cared for, seemed like a stranger. "But I just gave you part of my liver. I saved your life." My voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of disbelief and anger bubbling to the surface. "That's just it, Laura. You did save my life, and I'll be forever grateful. But gratitude isn't enough to sustain a marriage. We've been drifting apart for years, and this is just the final straw." His words cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I had laid on that operating table for him, endured pain and risked my life, and this was how he repaid me? With coldness and divorce papers? "You knew what you were signing up for when we got married," I retorted, my anger rising. "You promised to be there in sickness and in health. Or does that only apply when it's convenient for you?" Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know what I said, Laura, but people change, situations change. I need to think about my future, and I can't see you in it anymore." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell him how unfair this was, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "So this is it? You're abandoning me when I need you the most?" "It's not like that, Laura. I can't be the person you want me to be. I'm sorry." Without another word, Ethan turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heart shattered into a million pieces. As the door clicked shut, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Ethan, the man who couldn't bear the thought of caring for his sick wife, was alive because of me. And now he was walking away, free to live his life, while I lay here, broken and betrayed. In that moment, a fire ignited within me, burning away the remnants of my affection for Ethan. He wanted a divorce? Fine. But I wouldn't make it easy for him. I would fight back, and I would make sure he regretted this day for the rest of his life. The days turned into weeks, and the hospital room felt more like a prison than a place of healing. Each day blended into the next, marked only by the visits from doctors and the occasional obligatory check-in from Ethan's family, who seemed more concerned with his well-being than mine. It was during one of these long, lonely afternoons that I found myself reflecting on the past, on how Ethan and I had arrived at this painful juncture. Our story began at the small publishing firm where we both worked. Ethan, with his keen insight into political affairs, and I, a hopeful comic artist, found ourselves drawn together by our shared ambition and love for the written word. Our relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by late-night discussions about our dreams and aspirations. Ethan was charming, passionate about his work, and seemingly devoted to me. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true. However, the dream began to crumble soon after our wedding. Ethan's career took off, and he became consumed by his work, leaving me to manage the household alone. Our conversations, once filled with mutual respect and understanding, turned into heated debates about my role in our marriage. "You knew what you were getting into when you married me, Laura," Ethan would say whenever I voiced my loneliness or dissatisfaction. "I need a partner who supports my career, not someone who needs constant attention." I remember trying to express how isolated I felt, only to be met with dismissal. "Laura, you're overreacting. We're doing fine. You just need to find something to keep you busy," he'd respond, his eyes glued to his phone or laptop, never really seeing me. The realization that Ethan saw me more as a convenience than a partner was a bitter pill to swallow. I threw myself into my comics, pouring my heart and soul into the panels. trying to fill the growing void between us. My characters lived vibrant, fulfilling lives, stark contrasts to my own, which seemed to be shrinking with each passing day. It was during a family gathering that Ethan's mother, perhaps sensing my growing despair, pulled me aside. "Laura, I'm sorry. Ethan has always been driven, but you don't deserve to be pushed aside. You're family now, and we're here for you, even if he's not." Those words, meant to comfort, only deepened my sense of failure. How had my life become a series of apologies and excuses for the man I loved? Our marriage, once the source of my happiness, had become a facade. I was living with a man who valued his career and social standing more than our relationship, a man who believed my sacrifice and support were simply parts of the role I had agreed to play. The love and partnership I had once believed in had dissolved into a business arrangement, one that Ethan was now seeking to terminate because I had become an inconvenient liability. As I lay in the hospital bed staring at the sterile white walls, I realized that Ethan's request for a divorce wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was my chance to reclaim my life. No longer would I be the silent supporter, the convenient wife. I would fight back, not just for the sake of revenge, but to regain my dignity and self-worth. Ethan thought he could discard me after everything I had done for him, after I had literally given a piece of myself to save his life. But I would show him that I was more than just a caretaker, more than just his wife. I was Laura Barnes, and I would not be underestimated. The resolve that had sparked in me the day Ethan walked out of my hospital room had now turned into a roaring blaze. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth and a newfound strength that Ethan had never seen. The day Ethan was diagnosed with cirrhosis was the day our fragile semblance of a marriage was put to the ultimate test. I remember the cold, clinical tone of the doctor as he explained the severity of Ethan's condition. "Without a liver transplant, Mr. Barnes's prognosis is very poor," he had said, his gaze shifting between Ethan and me. Ethan's reaction was one of sheer denial. There must be some mistake. "I feel fine," he protested, but the evidence was irrefutable. The lifestyle he had led, the endless work events accompanied by heavy drinking, had taken their toll. It was then, in the stark, impersonal hospital room, that Ethan turned to me with a desperation I had never seen in him before. "Laura, you're my only hope. Please, I need you." The weight of his plea hung heavily between us. Despite everything, the part of me that had loved him, that still cared for him on some level, couldn't turn away. "If I'm a match, I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The tests confirmed that I was indeed a suitable donor, and the surgery was scheduled. The days leading up to it were a blur of paperwork, medical consultations, and a profound sense of loneliness. Ethan's family thanked me, their gratitude genuine, yet tinged with the unspoken acknowledgement of Ethan's role in his own predicament. "Thank you, Laura. You're doing a brave thing," Ethan's mother had said, her eyes wet with unshed tears. But Ethan's response was markedly different, almost indifferent, as if he considered my sacrifice a mere transaction. "You're saving my career, Laura. I won't forget this," he had said, but the warmth I had once felt for him was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The surgery itself was a success, at least for Ethan. He recovered quickly, buoyed by the prospect of returning to his life, his career. I, on the other hand, faced complications. The physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that Ethan viewed my suffering as a necessary inconvenience, a stepping stone on his path to recovery. During one of his rare visits to my hospital room, Ethan's true feelings became painfully clear. "You know, this really puts things into perspective. I need to focus on my recovery, on getting back to work. We'll talk about us later," he had said, avoiding my gaze. "Us? What's there to talk about?" "You've made your priorities clear, Ethan," I retorted, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ethan had merely shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "Laura, you knew what you were getting into when you married me. My career has always been my priority. You agreed to support me, remember?" That conversation was a turning point for me. It crystallized the stark reality of our marriage. To Ethan, I was nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient solution to his problems. My well-being, my dreams, my sacrifices were irrelevant to him. As Ethan left the room, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the sterile corridor, a resolve hardened within me. I would no longer be the silent, suffering wife. Ethan had taken everything from me, my love, my liver, and now he sought to discard me when I was no longer of use to him. But I would not let him. I would fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment of neglect, every dismissive word, every sacrifice made in vain. Ethan Barnes would learn that my generosity came with a price, one that he would pay dearly. In the sterile ambience of Ethan's lawyer's office, I found myself sitting across from the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Ethan's demeanor was a mixture of impatience and arrogance, a stark contrast to the gravity of our meeting. Without any preamble, he pushed a set of documents toward me. "Let's get this over with," Ethan said, barely hiding his disdain. "I've offered you a fair settlement. Everything is in order." I scanned the documents, my heart sinking with each word. "Fair?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You think abandoning your wife after she saved your life is fair?" Ethan smirked, a cold glint in his eyes. "I'm just being realistic, Laura. Our marriage was over long before this. It's better for both of us to move on." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension, but Ethan waved him off, his focus solely on me. "Look, Laura, I'm starting a new chapter in my life. I suggest you do the same. Take the settlement. It's more than generous given the circumstances." His words stung, a brutal reminder of the transactional nature of what our marriage had devolved into. "A new chapter? At my expense?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You owe me for every sacrifice, every ignored plea for attention, every moment of pain." Ethan laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're delusional if you think you're entitled to anything more. I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing." That was the last straw. The pain and humiliation I had endured crystallized into a fierce resolve. "We'll see about that, Ethan. You may think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure of it." As I left the office, Ethan's facade of confidence seemed to crack, revealing a flicker of doubt. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer the woman he thought he could easily discard. The days that followed were a blur of strategizing and planning. Mark, a colleague and friend, became my ally in the quest for justice. Over coffee one afternoon, I shared the full extent of Ethan's betrayal, my words painting a vivid picture of the man behind the public persona. "He can't get away with this, Laura," Mark said, his anger mirroring my own. "You deserve better. We need to expose him for who he truly is." "I agree," I replied, the weight of my decision heavy on my shoulders. "It's time for some well-deserved karma." Together, we crafted a plan that was both bold and risky. Utilizing Mark's connections, we secured an interview with a prominent online platform known for its investigative journalism. The piece would detail my side of the story, laying bare Ethan's deceit and manipulation for the world to see. On the day the article was published, I felt a mix of fear and vindication. The headline alone, "The Unseen Sacrifice, A Wife's Tale of Betrayal and Bravery," was a testament to the journey I had embarked upon. Ethan's reaction was swift and predictable. His fury came through the phone line, palpable and venomous. "How dare you do this to me, Laura? You'll pay for this." "It's only the truth, Ethan," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "Something you've been running from for far too long." "You think you can destroy me?" "I'll sue you for defamation," he threatened, his voice a blend of anger and desperation. "Go ahead and try," I countered, a sense of empowerment coursing through me. "Everything in that article is the truth, and I have the evidence to prove it. It's your word against mine, and the court of public opinion has already made its verdict." The call ended with Ethan slamming the phone down, but I remained unfazed. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life and dignity, no longer a silent victim of Ethan's cruelty. As the fallout from the article began to unfold, with Ethan's public image and career taking a hit, I watched from a distance. There was no joy in my heart, only a solemn satisfaction that justice was finally being served. I had started this fight to expose the truth, not for revenge, but to reclaim my voice that Ethan had tried so hard to silence. Now, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them head-on. The aftermath of the article's publication was like watching a slow-motion collapse of Ethan's carefully constructed world. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications, texts from old friends, colleagues, and even strangers expressing their support and sharing their own stories of disillusionment and betrayal. It was overwhelming, yet validating. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself in the eye of a storm he could no longer control. The first crack in Ethan's armor appeared publicly when a video of him confronting a journalist went viral. His anger, usually so well masked by charm and wit, was on full display for the world to see. "Why don't you tell the real story about how Laura is trying to ruin my life?" Ethan spat at the journalist, who merely replied, "We're just interested in the truth, Mr. Barnes." The truth. A concept so foreign to Ethan, it seemed to enrage him further. His tirade continued, unaware of the cameras recording every word, every gesture of disdain. This was not the Ethan the public knew and admired. This was the man I had lived with, fought with, and ultimately left. As Ethan's public persona unraveled, I received a call from Mark, his voice tinged with excitement and anticipation. "Have you seen the latest? Ethan's self-destructing. Your story has opened the floodgates. People are coming forward with their own experiences." I hadn't anticipated the breadth of the impact. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's more than I expected. I just wanted to share my story, not this." Mark was quick to reassure me. "Laura, you did the right thing. Ethan's true colors needed to be exposed. The world needed to see him for who he really is." As Ethan's life spiraled, his attempts to regain control became more desperate and pathetic. Sponsors withdrew their support. His social media became a battleground, and his professional engagements dried up. The man who once held the power to sway public opinion was now a pariah, his words dissected and discredited. The culmination of Ethan's downfall came one evening when I saw him pleading his case on a low-rated talk show, a far cry from the influential platforms he once frequented. "I've been misrepresented," Ethan claimed, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." But the host was unsympathetic. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Barnes. Your actions, your words, have led us here. It seems you are your own worst enemy." Watching Ethan flounder, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing him destroyed, no joy in his suffering. What I felt was a somber recognition of the inevitable conclusion to a story that had started the moment Ethan chose his ambition over our marriage, his ego over our partnership. The chapter closes not with a celebration of victory, but with a quiet contemplation of the cost of truth. Ethan's downfall was a public spectacle, but for me, it was a deeply personal closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me to the brink. I turned off the TV and looked around my quiet apartment, the noise of Ethan's downfall fading into the background. It was time to move forward, to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. Ethan's legacy would be one of caution and regret, but mine was still unwritten. And with each passing day, I was finding the strength to write a new chapter, one defined by resilience, dignity, and an unyielding pursuit of truth. Ethan's downfall from grace wasn't just a spectacle. It became a cautionary tale whispered within the corridors of power and across social media platforms. His attempts to salvage his reputation only dug his grave deeper, each denial and accusation against me serving to alienate him further from the court of public opinion. A few weeks after the tumultuous interview, Ethan reached out to me directly for the first time since the article's publication. His voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a note of desperation. "Laura, please," Ethan pleaded over the phone. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we just meet and sort this out?" His words, meant to sway, only served to remind me of the countless times his promises had fallen flat. "Sort this out?" I echoed, my tone incredulous. "Ethan, there's nothing left to sort. You made your choices." "But I'm losing everything," Ethan stammered, the facade of the unflappable commentator crumbling. "Can't you see? This vendetta of yours is destroying me." I paused, weighing my response. "This isn't a vendetta, Ethan. It's accountability, something you've avoided for far too long." Ethan's reply was a mix of anger and pleading. "I'll make it right, Laura. Just help me stop this madness." "Stop it," I replied, a resolve strengthening within me. "Ethan, the only madness was thinking you could treat people the way you did without consequence. You're on your own." The call ended with a click, and I was left with the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan was facing. His empire, built on charisma and manipulation, was now just ruins, his legacy tarnished by his own actions. The weeks that followed saw Ethan's public appearances dwindle to nothing. The few platforms that once vied for his insights now shunned him, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Even his social media, once a battleground of support and condemnation, went silent, as if the world had moved on, leaving Ethan Barnes a mere footnote in a relentless news cycle. But the true extent of Ethan's downfall was brought home to me one evening when Mark called, his voice somber. "Have you heard? Ethan's been let go from his consultancy. Apparently, the firm wants to distance themselves from any controversy." I hadn't heard, and the news left me with a complex knot of emotions. Ethan had built his career on being the voice of reason, the insightful commentator who could unravel complex political landscapes with ease. Now he was voiceless, his fall from grace complete. "It's a shame," I found myself saying, not just for Ethan, but for all that had been lost along the way. "He had potential, Mark. He just lost sight of what was important." Mark agreed, the conversation drifting to other topics, but my thoughts remained on Ethan. In his relentless pursuit of success, he had sacrificed everything, including those who cared for him. His downfall was not just a failure of character, but a warning of the price of ambition unchecked by empathy or responsibility. As I hung up the phone, the finality of Ethan's situation settled over me. There was no joy in his loss, no sense of victory in his defeat. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable outcome of a life lived at the expense of others. Turning away from the window, I realized that while Ethan's story might have ended, mine was just beginning. Freed from the shadow of his deceit, I could finally start anew, building a future on my terms, defined not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of tomorrow.